everybody, welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to be making a little aim-in break and a bass line off my move, and showing you a couple of techniques on how I make my music. So I'm starting off, I've got a little beat here on SoundForge on the PC. I use a PC and a Mac, and but today I'm going to be mainly using the PC. I've got a little aim-in break here. I'm using the spectrum analyzer to kind of just have a look at it. It looks like it's been EQ'd quite a lot already. I chop out every single hit in the break, so I can do that, and you can probably speed it up, I suppose, or whatever. So it takes a little minute. I like the fact on SoundForge you can scroll in and out with the mouse. It's really, really useful for me. It's one of the reasons why I've kept my PC, so that I can still use SoundForge. And what I do is I chop them into, like, I number each thing sequentially, so that when I drag it into Contact later on, I can kind of just drag and drop and it'll all be in the right place, if you know what I mean. So I like sort of the accuracy of it, because I can kind of see where the notes are really starting, because on SoundForge you can kind of see it. And the other editors, I never kind of got to grips with, like, the user interface. I couldn't see, like, the exact start of a wave. The kind of particular stuff I look for in a beat when I'm going to chop it is, I guess it's got to be really clean, and I don't like having too much effects on there or anything like that, because it makes it harder to chop, and I like kind of adding my own effects to it, if you know what I mean. So about as clean as possible, and kind of recorded flat with no compression or anything like that, because that can also kind of mess with, like, the shape of each hit, if you know what I mean. The transients, I guess. I used to lived in St Paul's before I moved up here about 6 months ago, and it was wicked down there because I could kind of just play it as loud as I wanted, and I used to just stick the speakers out the window. And I used to, like, when we were recording vocals, we'd leave the window open so we could get, like, the ambience of the outside world, and it kind of, like, I don't know if you can hear on Deep, which is one of the tunes that I've just recently, well, released it quite a while ago, but it's going to be on my album. We kind of, you can just about kind of hear someone sort of shout in the background in one of the verses when it filters down. You can kind of take the groove out of a beat as well, when you chop it like this. You can kind of just see sometimes when you do, like, you take 2 hits out of a break, they're sometimes not exactly halfway, if you know, there's a little kind of groove to it, and drum and bass doesn't really work with that. Although some producers are starting to use a groove again, like Sub Focus is, I think his track Druggy had a kind of shuffle groove. Okay, so if I was making a tune, I'd probably just chuck this aim-in into Contact, but because I want the aim-in to be the main feature of the track, not that I'm really making a track, but it's kind of starting off that way. I'm going to take each hit and put it on a separate channel on the arrange page of Logic, so I'll open up Logic. Okay, so Logic's up and running. Load my sounds into there. So I've got some screen sets. I find screen sets really useful in Logic, because you can just kind of jump around to different pages, and so I use them a lot. And I kind of set up one on number 4, which has got the arrange page and the audio window, so you can just drag things over there. So again, this will take a little minute. Set the tempo somewhere. There you go. 174. Okay. I'm going to use the same kick again. Guess I could just do that. Find the snare. I'm just kind of laying out the beat on different tracks on Logic. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I kind of like the freedom it gives you to put plugins on each hit and like EQ each hit individually to kind of make it more distinctive, and you can kind of flavour each hit instead of having them all with one EQ on them, because I find that you want to bring out certain elements in each drum. So, and I do it in the same way if I was making any other break, not just an Amen break. I find that quite inspiring. So like, I might individually sort of solo a hit and maybe use Paz Analyzer to have a look at it. I take the low frequency res down to 0 so that I can see all the really low end stuff going on, because you can lose a lot of energy in a sound in the low end. Just taking down, there's like a low frequency res, it takes more processor power to look at it like that, but it kind of gives you a better view of the low end of the track of the sound, but I can kind of see there's not too much bottom end going on. So it actually looks pretty flat to me, really. The only thing I might do is, because there's a big peak up here at A, I'd EQ a little bit off and move a little bit more in the mid, because I can see there's a bit kind of missing in the mid range, so I'll do that. I'll just bring up an EQ. The one thing I really miss about Logic 7, which I've got on the Mac, is the EQ is fantastic, and it's got the spectrum analyzer behind the thing that you can see what you're doing, so I don't have to do this. I just have the spectrum and the EQ kind of in the same window. With pads you can kind of pinpoint frequencies, which you can't do on Logic, but I'm just adding a bit in the mid-range. The mid-range can really slam the track through, if you know what I mean? And then because I've done some EQ work, I've done some adding in the EQ, I'll probably have to turn it down a little bit, so it's the same level as it was before. Here there's like a peak in the low end as well, so I can see there's one around sort of 67 Hz, so let's add a little bit there, with quite a tight Q on the EQ because it's got a resonance there, but that, because it's so low, it will be quite thunderous on a PA, but that's because the Amen's going to be the main feature of this break. I want it to kind of have that thunderous Amen sound, not just the squishy top end from it, if you know what I mean. So I brought out a bit of that. It kind of sounds to me like it's too long as well, the hit. So maybe just fade it out a little bit. With Logic you can sort of change the shape of the fade, so that's what I'm doing there. I'm just making it so it doesn't do like a fade that's just going to cut it straight off. It kind of tapers it a little bit and doesn't make it so extreme. So fade out. Kind of got more of an attack to it. there's another kick there. So I'll probably do a different EQ on this kick, so it's not the same as the other one, because it kind of goes dun dun ksh. So I'm going to make this one higher, so the frequency in the low end that I accentuate, I'm going to use a higher frequency that still resonates. And it actually naturally is a higher, the amen break, I don't know how they made it sound like it does, because it is just, the drummer that drummed that he's a god. I'm kind of just rolling off some of the top end, just to listen to it really. I'm going to take out, I think, a bit of 5k, just to kind of flatten it a little bit. And again add in the mid-range, because it's got a big kind of dip there. And it's not like I'm kind of trying to make it fat, but there's a lot of information in that mid-range to your ears, and there's a lot of power there as well. Like when you're making tunes for the dance floor, the mid-range is really where all the power is. Because you might turn up and DJ somewhere and there's no bottom end and there's no top end, there's just like mid-range speakers in there, you know, or the bottom end's just completely compressed because the last DJ's, you know, slammed it or whatever. So if you've got mid-range, if it's represented in your tunes, you're going to kind of, you're not going to lose anything when you kind of DJ after someone else. So there's a little peak there. I kind of found the resonance there. There's one there, there's one down later on. That's sort of 60. But it's a bit high still. It's like 130. And there you go. Still too much. I'm probably going to put like 2 decibels of that in there. So not a lot. And it kind of makes it go through, and it's almost got like a note to it. So you can could almost start making a tune around that. Maybe like layer a sub underneath it, you can kind of hear tones in the break. I'm going to take a little bit of top end out, bottom end out of these kind of rolls. I call them f***ums. You probably have to cut that out, right? Let's just have a look at it on the spectrum. So yeah, probably cutting up around 460, a bit more. Just copying the plugin over. There's not so much sort of bottom end in the shaky bits, which leaves a lot of room for either sounds in the track or some bass or something like that. And it also kind of makes it so the kick and the snare are the main features in the break. I've got 2 snares in there, and the first one's really nice, but the second one doesn't sound so nice. So I'm actually going to just put the first snare on every single one. And for a snare, it's got kind of it's really high, it's been tuned really, really high. So that's just like the natural, I think the guy who drummed that Amen tuned his drums in a certain way, and that's why they sound so good. It's quite hard to bring out that note. I think it would be quite... Yes. really high, it's like 500 hertz. If I have a look at it, it might be something a bit lower. Yeah. So down, a bit further down. That's kind of the low end sorted out on the snare. And then, I don't know, I'm kind of trying to read it, but I'd say kind of maybe put a shelf on the top end and bring it down, but then bring it up somewhere else to kind of balance that out. Take out a little bit, because there's like a peak, but I want it to be flat. Really explain what I'm doing, because I'm just kind of doing it kind of by just like listening to it, and I guess I should A and B stuff, but I don't really do that. So it's just kind of a little flavour. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it on the camera, but should probably turn it down a bit. Kind of turning everything down to kind of level the drums. When I do drums, I always try and listen to them really quietly as well, because you get more of an idea of kind of what it sounds like. Or I might go into another room and just put it on in the other room, and you can get more of a vibe on. I don't know whether the kind of a natural acoustics in a room help you hear something or something like that, but when I mastered my album at Metropolis, Stuart had like the big PMC monitors, which are like 100 grand, and then he had like these other little monitors which he put behind the mastering desk, and every now and again he'd kind of A and B onto the little monitors that were just under the desk. I think what he was doing is kind of getting an idea of what it would sound like in another room, so it was quite interesting for me. And so I was kind of doing it before as well, before I went and saw him do that. I guess it's just something you do when you're listening to try and get a vibe for something. And then I'll look at like the whole beat. It's a bit hot on the top end, but I mean drum and bass generally is pretty hot on the top end anyway, so it's alright. It's not perfectly flat, but I've kind of balanced it a bit more. I don't know if we can, I don't know if you can see that. Turn off the EQs that I'm using and reset this. Doesn't look any different whatsoever, but it does sound quite different. The spectrum analyzer kind of gives you a flavour of what the sound looks like, and particularly useful for the bottom end. But yeah. That's pretty much it really. I suppose I might sort of arrange it a little bit. Probably into an 8-bar loop and take off these last two ones, because that's something that I do, but you can leave that out or put it in if you want. That's kind of a rolling beat, I suppose. It's not really, it's just just an amen, isn't it? I might put like a little EQ on there. Just to kind of master it a little bit. But I try not to do too much kind of mastering of anything before I get to putting it into the... Because I found I used to do my breaks really smashed, and then you put them into the arrange page and you try and kind of smash it with the rest of the tune, and it just sounds like a big mess. You know, you want to have everything well, personally I want to have everything in the arrange page as clean as possible, and then let the mastering house put a bit of limiting on the end and EQ it and stuff like that. They need to do their job. That's what they're getting paid for, isn't it? It seems like the first hit doesn't have enough impact, but it might just be logic. No, it's alright. Maybe do a little build. Saves time later on, you know. I'm making a little dub plate, really, I suppose. I mean, if I was to, I probably wouldn't, if I was making one of my sort of more intricate tracks, I probably wouldn't start like this. I think I'd start with a break and maybe an amen and some hats and some cymbals and stuff, and build the break that way, and maybe even some percussive sounds too. But when I make dirty little dub plate rollers just to play out like with just a beat and a bass, this is how I'd approach it. It's a bit like Game Over was a bit like one of those. It's one of the tracks that I've had out. Yeah, so this is my Moog row. I'm going to make a little bass on here. At the moment it's not really set up to make a bass. That's quite a fat little sound though. In fact, I might sample that sound. So I'm running it directly into my Focusrite Trackmaster, which is one of the best things I think I ever bought for making music. It's really versatile bit of kit. So just straight, no EQ, no compression, and no 75 Hz cut, because you won't get any of the bass. I like the Focusrite so much because it's got really good sort of sound to it. It's really clean. I just bought it sort of because I needed a mic pre, but I've actually ended up recording pretty much everything that I've recorded through it, and adding just maybe a bit of top end or using the EQ. It's got quite a flexible EQ. It's fixed, but it's just got a great sound to it. And I've just recently got the digital card for the Focusrite, which is like a little card that goes in the back, and you can run SPDIF out the back, and it's got really good ADs, because I was really lacking in ADs. I had like the ones in my PC which were just audio file, and I had another outboard audio file card, but it just wasn't really cutting it when I was recording my Neumann, and the sound just wasn't great. But anyway, I'm digressing off the subject. So yeah, got the Moog. I've got a little sound on there, but I quite like that sound, so I'm going to just record that for me for later on. So yeah, if we focus down on the Moog, there's not really a bass sound, so I guess depends what you want. The reason why older synths is you just cannot get that sound out of a soft synth. So we could kind of think about I don't know about that. Maybe a different kind of sound. I'm kind of getting like a straight square wave bass. Sounds like it's sounds like it's distorted. It's kind of like a nice little vibe. Sort of a wobbly kind of bass, I suppose. I don't know. An internet people. So yeah, try recording one of those. Maybe beef it up a bit on the Focusrite. Can I get this? Just maybe tune it a little bit. You can actually run these at the same time, so you can look at it and EQ it while you record. See what I mean? There's not a lot I can do really. Maybe add some tube sound to it. And the bass EQ on the Focusrite is pretty decent, so you can pick out a frequency. I'm probably going to pick out kind of the mid between 150 and 200 and just add a bit, but just a little bit. You can maybe hear, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but it's kind of cutting through a bit more on these speakers. They're not the greatest speakers in the world really. They're good for what I need, little Yamaha MSP5s. But the bass, there's no bass on them whatsoever. So I can usually tell, maybe put on some headphones or something like that, but you can't mix in headphones. So it's I probably use the spectrum analyzer most for bass, because you can see the relative kind of balance of the track. So I'll record a couple of notes of that. And maybe leave the tail on as well, because I might want to use that. And because it's like an analog synth, it doesn't stay in pitch, it kind of fluctuates a little bit. It gives it a lot more character. This is going to be quite a wobbly tune, I think. But I like those, they work when you're DJing. Sometimes you just need a break, you need something to kind of, I think people need something to space out on, I suppose. That's quite a decent bass. I mean, there is a classic kind of Reese sound that you can get out of the Moog as well, out of this one. I really like that noise. Listen to it all day. Yeah, so I'll record a bit of that. I think I'm going to add some top end to that on here. It's kind of like, so it's not too much, but it's just like, just about right. Maybe a bit more sub, like the lower sub. It's like a, because it's always kind of, I don't know, oscillating, I suppose. You have to kind of catch the start of the notes. You have to, I kind of record a few hits of it. Sometimes you hit it like right on and it sounds great. That's the beauty of analog synthesis. That was a good one. Try again. That wasn't so good. I think the first one was the best. That's a nice one, kind of like on the up. So, that's nice. That's really nice. Going back to the soft synth stuff, you don't get waves that look like that. They're just, they almost look organic, if you know what I mean. They look like a picture instead of just perfect, you know, totally perfect. You can see if you zoom in up there, it's like loads of harmonics, and it rolls off really nicely in a natural way. I like that. So I've got the start point pretty bang on. Save that. Reese. I take a higher hit. I don't know how I can sort of change it a bit. What's happening, bruv? Hold on a sec. The tune? Say hello, Jakes, you're on camera.
I'm on camera, yeah? Hello. Everyone else gets it off.
You in it, yeah? We just need, I'm making a little skanky little dub plate. And I just need a little word for it. Oh, I haven't really got it yet. I've chopped up an A minor and made a bass, so there's this bass.
This ain't a starter, and this ain't a starter, it's the finisher. Come play your part, boy. Get it wrong. This ain't the starter, it's the killer shot. It's just a big sound. Are you willing here? This ain't the starter, it's a finisher. You see, man? And that's it.
Cool. Wicked. Put that sound into Logic. Using Contact. So I've got to do a bit of EQ on those, I think, really. It's actually too much low end, I think, in this bass. I guess it's kind of a grimy little roller, I don't know. Oh, I got an idea. I've done this for a while. I'm going to try using a different quantize. Every third note is doubled. I don't know. I'm under pressure now. Probably need a different sound actually to go in that other part. Maybe try layering them together. It's very dry, that sound, so maybe put on a bit of tape delay or something. Seems it's a bit kind of like full on, that sound, but then that kind of sound isn't really the sound for the Amen. It's kind of the sound that I'd use maybe on a bigger track, so I don't think I'm going to use that in it. I don't really want to give it away either. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the bass. There's a bit too much low end in there, like really low end. So I'm kind of just bringing out the top end on it. So it's like that whole mid-range thing again, you know. It's good to have a lot of information about other sounds, but in the mid-range so people can still connect with it. Need like a little grimy sample, which we just got. I'm just chopping out the different bits. I might have to chop them a bit smaller later on.
It's the Felicia. This ain't a starter. It's the Felicia. This ain't a starter. It's the Felicia.
So I should probably put that one on there twice and loop it or something. I'll just find a start point.
Finish it.
I'm gonna get so much hate for this fucking tune, man. He just went on there and he just made us some wobble tune. What? That's bad. That's old school. I'm just kind of having two instruments in contact, and so you can put different effects on the different sounds on the keys. I might try using a bus to do a delay, like an old analog desk. The way you do it back in the day would be to have your delay on a bus and then you kind of send to it, you know. I'll probably only do the delay on the second one. So I recorded in some track automation there, using the touch function on the thingy, on the mixer. I like recording all my track automation in as well, because I think it's, you know, it has a kind of better sound to it, instead of like drawing squares and stuff, you know. Quite strange, because that lead sound isn't really the kind of sound that I'd use in a tune like this. I think I'm going to take that breeze sound out. I don't think it kind of fits the vibe on the track. I'm going to layer the bass, I think. So roll off the bottom end on this. So it's just like the elements kind of above 100 Hz, and then find another bass sound somewhere. Like a really clean 808 kick or something like that. So I've got here. Maybe a longer one. Yeah, that one. I'd probably play that now. 5 basically because it's a lot easier for me. But I also use Logic 7.1, I think it is, on the Mac. I did most of my album on that. But when I'm just kind of making ideas, I find them, because I used Logic 5 for so long, it's a lot easier for me. I just kind of like, it's easier because basically I just used it for a lot longer than anything else. But I was on like the Atari before that, and I think I used a program called MIDI Man or something, because I couldn't afford Logic, and it like came free with the Atari, and I used like a sampler and stuff, and kind of worked my way up buying sort of bits of kit, and I wouldn't say that I don't like soft synths, but I think that soft synths sound like they all seem to have a very similar sound. It all sounds like numbers, and perfect squares, and I know some of them have sampled waveforms, but I think even then they don't really cut it because it doesn't change all the time. There's no like, because my Moog is sitting in the sun right now, the transistors that are making the oscillations of the waveforms are getting hotter, and they change pitch, and so it's almost like it's absorbing the vibes from the room, and you have to kind of, they never stay in pitch or time or anything like that. So I would like the kind of, it's just fat, analog sound is fat. I know I'm recording it digitally, but I use good ADs and I think I capture the sound. With the recording of the vocals on my album, I think I recorded Jake's, and Hannah and myself. I think we're the only people featuring on the album. Jake's, for deep, we used, it was one of the first cardioid mics that I bought. It's over there, but I can't remember what it's called. I think it's an AKG. Audio Technica mic, and it really suits his voice, and we still use it to record him now because he sounds better on that than he does on a Neumann. I've got a Rode NT1A as well, which I use to record Hannah because it's got a kind of airy sound to it, and I use the Neumann for myself, and I kind of mix and match. In terms of production, I do a lot of layering, so I record things 10-15 times, put them on the track and just layer it all up. I use a bit of Melodyne every now and again. I don't really use auto-tune, because I think it sounds really computery. Even when you only use it a little bit, you can still hear that it's there, whereas with Melodyne, if you're having a bad day, you can just kind of give it a bit of tuning, which is really, really great. But I've never used Melodyne on Hannah, or Jake's. I think I used it once with Jake's, but to kind of pitch him really low, to do a really low harmony that you couldn't physically do. So so I like Melodyne for the vocal production. And for myself, I don't know really, just lots of layers, because it helps disguise the fact that I've got a terrible voice. I find when I'm writing, I tend to I make the track and then I start writing for it, and then I get excited and I start recording, when what I really should do, and I need to check myself on this, is to kind of make the track, write the vocal separately, and then record it, because I always get bogged down in the recording side of things, and then it leaves me less freedom to kind of I might miss ideas and stuff about lyric writing, because I'm kind of trying to make sure that it's panned right, or and I found recently I've kind of been developing, when I record a vocalist, I get them to do multiple takes, and then I used to start putting it into the track whilst they were here, but now I just get everything that I need out of them, and then edit it in in like another session. Because again, you can kind of pick someone off if you're like they're ready to do a performance and you're kind of chopping up a vocal of theirs. You know, the best advice I could give anyone that wanted to start making drum and bass would be to buy a computer to start off with, and then buy some good monitors. And they don't have to be very expensive. The monitors that I'm using to make my music cost me 300 quid. It's quite a lot of money to some people, and to me, you know, when I bought them, it was quite a lot of money. It still is quite a lot of money, really. But yeah, the Yamaha MSP5s are what I use, but there's lots of little monitors around there. There's other choices, and I think that's the best piece of advice, because it's the window to the sound. You can learn a monitor, you know. You can listen to other people's music and then make your music sound the same. But if you haven't got a decent enough speaker to do that, you're not going to get very far. Because, yeah, monitors are definitely well worth investing in. Next thing, I don't know. Once you've got your monitors, I don't know, good records to sample, a decent record deck. And doesn't really matter what computer you get. I mean, I used a really terrible PC for years and years and years, and I still do. You know, it's not the greatest computer in the world, but it doesn't matter what you've got, as long as you've got the patience to sit down and kind of do it, I suppose, or the dogged determination.